Okay, so for now, we're gonna move to the second part, which is how to analyze a story, and which is really important because this is what you will be doing in a minute in today's class. So you will be looking at a video how to analyze a poem. So can you just let me make sure you can listen? Did I share with the voice? Yes, with the sound. Okay, perfect. Let's go here. Okay. Now, how you are going to analyze a short story. Just look at that.
Before you start writing, make sure you understand the story well, look up unknown words, and highlight sentences that are important. Also think about whether the story contains some symbols that are essential for your analysis. The easiest part of the analysis is usually the setting. The authors like to describe it directly or not mention it at all. However, your job is to note where and when the story takes place. Sometimes, for example, the social environment is relevant too. The plot is like the structure of the story. Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and the resolution are the pillars on which the story is built. Usually, in a short story, you will find only one scene or an event which impacts the protagonist in some way. Is the plot linear, chronological, or does it change? These questions should help you with understanding the story. Let's take, for example, Cinderella. You know her. The exposition is where we discover the everyday life of her. The action rises when Cinderella gets invited to the ball but is not allowed to attend it. However, she rebels against her stepmother and meets the prince anyway. The climax is when she leaves at midnight, losing a glass slipper in the process. The consequence of this event is that the prince says that he will marry the woman whose foot fits in the slipper. The slipper fits only Cinderella's foot. The resolution is Cinderella and the prince get married. End of the story. Now that you are familiar with the plot, you are also familiar with the characters. There are two types of them. Flat characters, for example, Cinderella's stepmother doesn't change throughout the story at all. On the other hand, Cinderella, who starts as a poor servant but ends up as a maybe rich princess. These changes can be external or internal, where the character's mind changes. Sometimes there's an antagonist. It's typical for them that their personality is the opposite of the protagonist's. Nick Adams, for example, is the famous protagonist from Hemingway's short stories. Now, how writers reveal their characters. Their personality traits can be expressed directly or indirectly. When there's a sentence like, "He was a great liar," then it's a direct commentary from the author about the character. But you can get to know the character far better from the indirect characteristics. How the character speaks, argues, and thinks. What is the character afraid of? How does the character show emotions? What does the character think about themselves? What are their quirks and perks? Unfortunately, not all questions can be answered about every character. In the most short stories, the reaction to one single event is all the information you get. It's important to recognize what this event is and how does the character behave in that situation. Always remember, only what can be proved with lines can be interpreted. In the novel The Road, the main character battles mostly with an external conflict. The same external conflict that can be in a novel can also appear in a short story. Basically, it's a conflict with an outside force. The internal conflict happens in the character's mind. It's usually a difficult decision, denial, or for example dealing with a trauma. It studies the human psychology. In another famous novel, Lolita, the protagonist fights his own desires, which means it is an internal conflict. There are generally four types of point of view and narrators. The most commonly used is the third person limited and the first person. The other two are a rarity in literature. Themes are like the general ideas that make up the story. There are really many of them. For example, in Romanticism, nature was a popular theme. Every writer has a unique style, with the help of which they create the atmosphere in their stories. Tone in which they write sets the mood. You can ask yourself whether the story is easily readable to you. If so, the author uses probably a common language, short sentences, or a vocab that is modern. Don't forget to identify literature devices and explain their meaning. All in all, your analysis should be divided into three parts. The introduction, with a topic sentence where you write the name of the author, title, text type, genre, year of publication, and shortly what the story is about. In the second part belong a short summary where you answer the W questions. Also, you have to analyze the story with the help of the mentioned aspects. Try to connect your findings. And at the end, in the conclusion, you can give your own opinion to the story. Don't forget to use always the present tense.
Okay. Hope you get some insight, some ideas about how you analyze a poem, how to understand. So can you just write few of the words you heard in the video concerning understanding a short story? Just write any word that you can think of. Write the words you can you will use when you are interpreting or analyzing a short story. Okay, you look for literary devices. Yes, definitely. So I just pasted a story on Google Classroom. Can you go check if you can see the story? Can you confirm you can see it? And it's under the title, Hills Like White Elephants. Can you affirm, everyone? You can just type yes, you can see it or not on the Google Classroom. Yes, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Yasser. Very good. So before I ask you to do this assignment, now it's a classwork, I will really appreciate if we read some of the terminology that you will be using when you are analyzing a story, or for the exams, you will also be asked to figure out the elements of analyzing any story that you will also use in real life, like anywhere. Can you confirm you can see my screen, everyone? Okay. All right. So I just wanted you to look at certain terminologies here. The most of the time we'll be working on the terminology I know that you will need almost, I think, 2 hours to do the end of unit test for the poetry. So I will give you very short break, and probably will have only some of the terminology for today. Now, look at the word plot. This is what you exactly wrote in the chat box, what you heard in the video, and this is exactly what you will be looking for in any story or in novel, a short story or a long story, which is the novel. You will also have another unit concerning a novel. So it's important for you to understand what do we mean by the word plot. So it is what happens in the story. What are the events? What is the issue? The story is about what? If I refer you back to the story of the little girl I started with, it's a little girl who probably was crying because she couldn't find food. And finally, she is eating a sandwich, and now she is smiling again. So the very few lines here shows you the theme of the story, the message of the story, the plot of the story. It's very simple, very like just give you what is it about. You might probably say it is about hunger. It is about poor people. It is about the childhood that they are suffering. Any of those could be applicable. Now, if you wanted to expand the few lines I just tell you, or the few words, then you develop a plot. So a plot is what happens in the story. More specifically, it is the series of events that take place. It is action and reaction and rising actions and so on. And who is giving you all this? It's the narrator or the author, and he puts it always in a narrative mode to give you the feeling of a story. There are always 5 elements you should be looking for when you are reading a poem or a story, short story or a novel. You need to think of those terminologies. The exposition or the introduction, and then the rising actions, the climax or the turning point, and then the falling action, and then the resolution. It's like a triangle. If you remember in the video, it's like a triangle. We start from the base, we move up, 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 until we reach the top of the triangle, which is the climax, and then we start sliding down, 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 till the end or the resolution of the story. So what we call the exposition or the introduction, it is exactly the first part of the plot. It is all about the main characters, the protagonist, and the setting. And we'll be talking about every one of them in details later. The primary conflict or the tension around which the plot revolves is also introduced here in order to set up the course of the events to the rest of the narrative or the rest of the story. So it's like the gradual moving until you get a feeling or a taste of what is going to happen. The rising action here is the part of the plot which sets the rest of the plot in motion. The excitement grows as tensions get higher and higher, and until finally you reach the climax of the story. What is the climax? It's the highest, the most important piece in the whole story, when you have the events coming complicated or accelerated or turning point or something that drives urgency, any of those, so you get the moments of the plot. And then we move on slowly the other direction. The falling actions is starting to get down. The tension is lesser now, and we are driving closer to end of the story. The resolution is where towards the end of the story, where the climax is resolved. And it always has, exceptions expected or unexpected or open-ending ending. Not necessarily to be happy all the time. Sometimes the writer deliberately leaves it open without any decision, because probably he wants the reader to imagine what is the resolution, or they wanted the reader to have their own input, or because the problem is not solved yet. If you are talking about like people who are suffering to protect their land and they didn't get it till now, so maybe the writer wants it to be open because it resembles reality. Sometimes the writer wants to give you a happy ending because this is what he or she wants or hopes to get. So any of those would be acceptable in towards the end. The omniscient narrator is the narrator, the person who writes the story or the poem or any, like the writer. Is he present there and just telling you facts, or is he taking sides, or is he taking the tongue or the voice of one of the characters? So it could always be told from the first person perspective, or the second person, or the third person. It's important for you to see the difference. Now, if I say, I am the victim of the war in this story, so the writer is talking from the first person, talking about himself or herself as if he is the hero of the story, the protagonist. Protagonist meaning the main important character in the story. Second person, when I am having a conversation, talking to you did this and that, so there are live conversation here. Or the third person, when the writer is just writing as if they are telling the story or talking about people who do not exist. Like once upon a time there lived a girl. So he's talking about the girl as if a third person that is not existing here. We'll leave this for the coming period, because I just want you to go back to the story. I just send it on Google Docs, the elephants story, and I want you to please figure out those. I just put them here in the chat. I want you to go to the Google Docs and just to go for the story. I know that you might not be able to finish all of these, but let's focus on question number 1, which is the exposition and the introduction. And you can just move until the rising action, because I need to give you some kind of break before we go to the exam, the end of unit exam. You can move to climax. Maybe I give you a short break, not very long. So let's go to the Google Classroom and work on it. I can also continue sharing here just in case, but in the Google Classroom, it's easier for you to write your comments, right? And to write your feedback on those important pieces here. So just to double confirm that you can see the story. Again, the story is Hills Like White Elephants. It is by Ernest Hemingway. Here is the story. Like this is the beginning, and this is the climax here. So I'm gonna leave this for some time for you to read all, and I want you please to answer those questions on Google Docs. I'll check it over your classroom, Google Classroom. Any questions before we start the assignment? Any questions? It is 11 now. Any questions, any ambiguity, you don't understand anything? please write in the chat box or speak up. It's okay to speak up, by the way. No worries at all. Nobody's gonna hold you like, you know, it's okay. If you have any questions, is the assignment or the task clear, everyone? It's not labeling, Larine. It's you will be answering the questions. So these points, each one of you, you have your own page or your own assumption submission piece on Classroom, Google Classroom. Just copy the questions. I can copy the questions for you, and then you will answer them in the Google Classroom. It is finally due like for our next meeting. I'm not sure when is our next meeting. Probably it's going to be on Tuesday. Can you just to confirm if it is okay for you to meet on Tuesday from 6 to 9? Because this is what I was told by Mr. Hussein, that we need to have like more hours. So are you okay, everyone? Can you please just write in the chat? Okay, yes, sir. All right. What about the rest? Jawad, okay. So that could be from, it could be on Tuesday from 6 to 9 or to 8, I don't know, depending. Jawad, okay, Larine is fine. All right, great. How about Ahmed? Ahmed, are you in the class? Yes, okay, perfect. Perfect. Then probably I will tell Mr. Hussein that you are okay to meet on Tuesday from 6 to 9. Is it okay for you to do the assignment by Tuesday? And we can discuss it, by the way, together. I mean, it's okay to practice. This is kind of practice, okay? So that would be the due date, but you can start working on it for now. Just give it some time, start working on it, no problem. And I will be discussing how far you are there. I'll go to the Google Classroom and write the questions over there for you to help you understand exactly what is required from you at the Google Docs.